Hello everyone, this is my Chapter 7 discussion video. Question 1 says, compare and contrast the human capital advantage of work experience for unskilled white, Hispanic, and African American women. So on page 171 of our textbook it states, among high school graduates aged 18 to 24, 61% of white women are employed compared with 52% of blacks and 55% of Hispanics. And then a few lines down from that on the same page, it starts talking about hourly wages of unskilled women and how they don't vary that much by race. It says that on average, black women make $6.28 per hour, white women make $6.42 per hour, and on average, Hispanic women make $6.67 per hour. So this kind of shows that although when women of various races are employed, they're fairly similar. But I think that once they're hired, but white women are still a lot more likely to get employed than black women and Hispanic women, so there's still inequality there. Question 2 says, select two findings presented in Chapter 7 and explain how they evidence the intersection of race and gender in the U.S. labor market. So the first thing that I found that shows the intersection of race and gender is the graph on page 169 of our textbook. And this graph is titled Median Weekly Earnings by Race and Ethnicity and Gender. And after looking at that graph, we can see that on average, Asians and whites are still making more than blacks and Latinos and Hispanics. But and we can also see that by looking at the graph on the previous page. But then once you add the gender aspect in, we can see that men are paid more than women, no matter what their race is, all across the board. So Asian women are making more than black women, but no woman of any race is making more than a man. And then the second thing I found from Chapter 7 that intersects race and gender is on page 170 of our textbook, when they begin talking about the disparities among women. And I think it was really interesting to see that, as I mentioned before, wages don't vary much depending on race of women who are high school graduates or below. I was expecting white women to make more, but in fact it was Hispanic women on average that were making the most per hour. And this kind of makes me wonder why this is the case for women when men it's so drastic. And maybe you guys can help me figure out why race doesn't seem as obvious and as a problem for women when you just look at the numbers. So if you want to comment, maybe you have some insights that I don't. And finally, question 3 says, explain why incarceration rates must be taken into account in order to understand labor market inequality. Support your answer by identifying and describing two specific ways in which incarceration impacts the wage gap between black and white men. So as we've talked about and learned in previous chapters, African Americans are more likely to be incarcerated than whites on average. And I think the first way incarceration impacts the wage gap between black and white men is after an African American man has been released, they're probably less likely to get a good job with good wages because employers will see that they serve time and not want to hire them. And then a second way incarceration can affect the wage gap is if the black men who were incarcerated are hired, then they may be looked down upon and given a lower wage or position by their employer, even though they may be better qualified because they were previously incarcerated. And I think this all starts with the fact that African Americans are more likely, on average, to be incarcerated, and thus on average they get lower wages than whites. And then along with this, I think it's important to mention the stereotypes that we've talked about previously. These stereotypes tend to favor white men over those of color, and are often amplified when a person of color obtains a criminal record, and that can impact how employers view them, and often it's more negatively. And it also impacts their chance of getting the job or a higher position, and that kind of goes hand in hand with the wage gaps and how much money they're making. I think that's it. Thank you. I'm looking forward to watching the rest of your guys' videos.